Buck Martinez joins me in Studio Q. Hello.
Welcome, Shad. Good to be with you.
So I want to talk about team chemistry today.
Of course.
But first I have to ask you, what were you thinking as you laid on home plate with a broken leg?
Well, you know what? At the time, Bobby Cox was our manager, and we were really struggling. We were in first place, but we weren't scoring any runs. So all I was thinking about was I've got to make sure these guys don't score. And the first guy, Phil Bradley, hit me and really kind of
You felt it.
stars, yeah. I felt stars, and my leg went numb, and I held onto the ball. And I can remember the umpire, Larry Young, said, "Show me the ball, show me the ball." And I held the ball up in a fog, and then I saw Gorman running from second to third, and I tried to throw it to third, and it went down the left field line. George Bell was there. He threw it back to me, and all the while I was scooting around to get in position. I was sitting on home plate, and I got a one-hop throw and tagged out Gorman. And it was, once-in-a-lifetime play, and unfortunately that was my last play of the '85 season.
Adrenaline's a funny thing, isn't it?
It is. And you know what? You just react, and you know what? You think about making plays, and I never thought about, I didn't have any pain. That's the one thing. It didn't hurt. I was just like, okay, I got to catch the next ball. That's what we did.
Okay, let's on the topic of team chemistry now. You say in your book that you feel badly for today's players, which is going to surprise a lot of people because they're rich. But what was so great about being a player back in the 70s and 80s when you guys made less money?
Shad, obviously, the economics of the game are great. Ball players can set themselves up for life, and they can set up their immediate family and their big family for life economically. But I think my point in the book is I think they miss out on a lot of the camaraderie we had when I played. When I started playing in 1969 with the Kansas City Royals, I made $10,000 a year. So it was natural when you thought about the possibility of going to the World Series and maybe getting a check for $16,000 or $17,000. You're going to make more in the postseason than you made all year long. So there was a natural bond because everybody was playing for that same goal. Plus the fact most of us only had one car. We all lived in the same apartment building, and we had to live together, and we had carpools together. The wives and families were very close when we were on the road because they had to look out for one another. But now economically, obviously, everybody has multiple cars. Most people have nannies. The kids are taken care of, and they don't have that same chemistry that we had. But when you see good teams, and I'll include the Blue Jays in that conversation, they have chemistry. They have good character guys that care about the team more than they care about the individuals. And I think it's consistent. You saw it with the Yankees in the 90s. Mm-hmm. You see it with the Cardinals now. And the Blue Jays have put together a cast of characters that are very, very intense, and they're playing for one another right now.
It was so interesting reading those descriptions of baseball in the late 60s, the 70s, carpooling, those sorts of things that are
things you don't even think about nowadays.
Difficult to even imagine now. You also tell the story about the day during spring training, I think in Arizona, when your locker room flooded. What happened there?
Yeah, I was playing for the Brewers at that time, and we were training in Sun City, Arizona. We had a stadium, but our minor league complex was several miles away, and that's where we got all our work in before the games started. Well, this one season, they built a new complex just down the hill from our stadium in Sun City. But unfortunately, it was in a riverbed. And in Arizona, we get flash floods. And I remember we were with Frank Howard and a bunch of players before spring training started. We were out there a few days early, and we knew there was a storm coming. So we said, you know what, let's go in the clubhouse and lift all the shoes up and put them on the bench so they don't get wet should there be some water. Mm-hmm. We came back the next day, and the clubhouse was gone. The batting cages were miles down the riverbed, and we had a flash flood, and it was a historic flood, and we lost our entire spring training facility, the fields, the clubhouse, our equipment. So we had to dress at home. We were like playing in high school again. So everybody put their uniform on at home. We went to the ballpark, jumped on a bus, and we were orphans. We had no place to play, so we would wait for everybody else to finish. One day we would be at the Giants complex, the next day we were at the Mariners complex, the next day we were at the Indians complex, so we moved around. But I think that team, that Brewers team, was the closest team I've ever been on because we spent so much time together in tough situations.
So how does personal closeness translate to good performance?
Because you don't want to let your best friends down. And Russell Martin told me this at the end of last season, after the postseason. He said, winning is always great, but it's really special when you win with your friends. And that's what the Blue Jays have right now.
We play for each other.
Play for each other. You don't want to disappoint your best friends. So you look to your sides and you look to your left and your right, and you've got friends on all sides of you. And that's the best combination you can have. They're star players to begin with. Tulowitzki and Donaldson and Bautista and Encarnacion, but now they care about each other, and they don't want to disappoint their teammates.
How important is that in leadership, being an excellent player?
Well, it's important. Leaders can only be everyday players. You have to be on the field. You have to be participating. But, there are different leaders, and I think there are probably only a handful of leaders in the major leagues overall. I mean, guys that are true stars, but are unselfish, and they want the team to win. And they set the example. Of course, the most recent example of that, and one that everybody talks about, is Derek Jeter of the Yankees. He was a terrific leader, an understated leader, very quiet guy, but he led by example. And if you were out of line, he would bring it to your attention, but he never would embarrass you. There's a great story about Robinson Cano early in his career. He had a great game, and he was sitting in front of his locker, and he had the newspaper spread out, and he was reading the newspaper while doing an interview. Derek Jeter walked over and said, "Robbie, we don't do that. We don't treat people like that in this Yankee clubhouse." Cano never did it again.
So you painted a great picture of 70s baseball, carpools and potlucks with a team. How would you describe the solitude of the contemporary baseball player? Could you paint that picture for us?
Well, I think, now the economics, as we've talked about, are such that if players have an off day, some of them have private jets come to pick them up, and they fly home to spend with their families, which you truly understand. I don't think we should ever de-emphasize the significance and importance of families. And most of these guys are wonderful fathers and husbands and brothers. And I think they just have a tendency, because they can, to spend time with their families when we used to be stuck with our teammates because we couldn't go anywhere. And on off days, we would go fishing together, golfing together, we'd hang out together. And like I said, the wives were so close because they had to be. If you had a child that was sick, one wife would come over to babysit the other kids while the wife took care of her son or daughter. So it's just an economic situation. Now people live in distinctly different areas of town according to their preference. We all lived in an apartment building that we could afford.
It was interesting reading that problem because I see it as not just a baseball thing. We live in a society where independence is prized, financial independence is prized. It's an individualistic society. But what you're describing is actually mutual dependence leading to actually a more joyful experience.
Exactly. And I think it's true in the business world as well. If you're in an atmosphere where you enjoy the people you work with, you're going to perform better. There's no question about it. And I think what we have done is we've created this Instagram, Twitter society where people communicate without communicating. And they say things, and you can never have eye contact. And it's like you and I speaking here. It's a much better interview than it would be over the phone.
Yes.
And you have the ability to exchange, and you can see by expression what you mean and the intonation and different things. But I think the society has become so flipper-oriented, where you turn in the TV to every channel.
We don't need each other.
No, we don't need each other, and we don't lean on each other. And I think that's a societal problem, that we don't have that same reliance or communication or bonding with our fellow coworkers, people we mixed with every day.
How do Major League Baseball managers foster team chemistry?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge. I don't think that there's ever been a more difficult time in professional sports across the board to manage, because you're taking millionaires who are basically mini corporations trying to motivate them. And I think that's why the great managers in baseball stand out. The Joe Maddons, the Bruce Bochy's, the Mike Scioscias, the Buck Showalters, and Joe Girardi, because you have to outsmart people. You can't rule with an iron fist the way that the old managers did, Gene Mauch and Dick Williams, and guys that would scare you and threaten you to play well. Well, you can't do that anymore. If they're going to fine you $1,000, they'll whip out 10 and say, "Here's for the next 9." But you have to outsmart them. And what Joe Maddon has done with Tampa Bay and now with the Chicago Cubs is he has made these guys feel like they're kids again, having a great time playing the game. Who in the world would have thought you could get David Price to dress up in a onesie and go on a road trip? And he does this all the time. It's incredible. And Joe just made a great statement about the dress code for the Cubs. He said, if you feel hot in what you're wearing, go ahead and wear it.
That's the best dress code I think I've ever heard. You talked about the Blue Jays having a special thing going on chemistry-wise. David Price, a big part of that. What do you think he contributes?
Well, David Price, of course, went to the Red Sox in the offseason, but what I noticed last year when he joined the Blue Jays, he made them better immediately, even before he threw a pitch. He brought swagger and confidence into the clubhouse. In championship teams, and you go back to Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and Wayne Gretzky, they all had swagger on their teams because of their leader. And when Price joined the Blue Jays, he walked in the clubhouse and everybody said, "We got our stud now. We can play with anybody because David can beat anybody." And everybody else relaxed. They became more confident in their ability. The same happened to the Blue Jays when Jack Morris joined the Blue Jays in '92 after pitching that epic game in a '91 World Series. When he walked into the clubhouse that next spring, the Blue Jays had swagger. All of a sudden, we've got a star.
What do you think the Jays have learned now that Price is gone?
I think the Jays have learned that they can play with anybody. And now Marcus Stroman has been called upon to be that guy. He's got the color, he's got the pizzazz, he's got the charisma, and he has the Twitter world in his palms, and he loves that. And I think that's what baseball needs now. You'll recall that Bryce Harper, the Nationals, just had a big controversy with Goose Gossage about we need to show our personalities. And there are many, many great stars in the baseball game that are young, 21, 22, 23 years old. The younger audience has gone toward basketball because of the Steph Currys and all of the pizzazz and all the color they have. Well, baseball needs to emphasize these personalities, the Stromans, the Sanchez's, the Pilars, the Goins, the younger players where the young fan, 18 to 35, can associate with these people because they're the same age. They're their peers.
Tell me about team chemistry in the announcer booth. What's
It's
that like?
important as well.
Yeah.
Because during the course of a game, in the course of a season, 162 games, there are going to be times when not much is going on. So what we do, Pat Tabler and I work most of the games together, but what we do, we'll have a meeting at 3:30. We'll talk about the topics for that night, but we'll also talk about what's going on in the baseball world. Everybody's up to speed, and we all say during our 3:30 meeting that that's the best show of the day. Because everybody's exchanging their thoughts, talking about the team and talking about what's going on in baseball. And when you have that chemistry during the course of a game, I can look over at Pat without saying anything, and he knows where I'm going, and he'll do the same. If he starts a subject conversation, I know exactly where he's going. So that's what makes a beautiful broadcast, and it is chemistry.
Do you guys ever get off of baseball in your chats, your personal chats?
Not much, because we talk about personalities and characters, but we don't stray too far from baseball. We figure that the people turn on the game to watch baseball.
Yeah.
And we feel, I think for me personally, a perfect broadcast is a broadcast in which the fan believes he's sitting between two guys. We're having a beer at the ballpark talking about what's going on the field. I think that's the perfect broadcast.
Well, there's 1,000 ways to turn baseball into a metaphor for life, but for advice for regular people out there with regular jobs, what do you think we can learn about team chemistry in baseball?
I think you have to understand that not everybody can do things the same way you do it. Recognize their strengths, accentuate their strengths, and take them for what they are. They do their job as well as they can, and they're part of a team. And if you all have that attitude and not, we have a tendency in society today, look at what people can't do. And I think baseball is guilty of that as well. But what can they do? There are certain things they do better than anybody else. And when you think about a team, whether it's in the office or in the construction site or in a clubhouse, it's all about putting 25 or 30 guys together for the course of a season. And at some point, that guy's strength is going to help you win a ball game.
Buck Martinez, thank you.
Thanks, Shad.